Hello, everyone. This is Elizabeth Preston.
And I'm Sarah Adams.
And you're listening to
the Writing Docs Podcast,
where we discuss how businesses can help their teams to become better and more confident writers. If your team needs help achieving positive writing outcomes, then contact us at 877-249-7483 or email us at info@hurleywrite.com. Hello, everyone. This is Elizabeth, and I'm an executive consultant at Hurley Write, and you're listening to the Writing Docs Podcast, where we talk about how businesses can help their team members to become better and more confident writers. I'm here with my co-host, Sarah.
Hey, everybody.
And I'm excited to have Angie Pennington on our podcast today. Angie is an executive consultant at Hurley Write, as well as our social media manager. Angie has a master's degree in literature with an emphasis in writing theory and practice, and she's working on her PhD in technical communication and rhetoric at Texas Tech. She is our go-to person for all things digital and internet related, and she loves being on the cutting edge of the digital world and of the newest writing technologies, including artificial intelligence as a writing tool, which is why we've asked her to be on the show today. Welcome, Angie.
Hi, thank you for that introduction, Elizabeth.
Besides the fact that she's very cool, that's the other reason we asked her to be on the
That's the main reason I'm here, actually, is just to bring the cool energy.
Yes, Sarah and I need a cool injection, so Angie's here with us. I accepted long ago I will never be cool, and I'm okay with that.
I'm not cool.
I just different to everyone.
I'm not cool. I just like to play it on podcasts and on television.
Fair enough. Now, Angie, you and I have talked about artificial intelligence at work, partly because we're nerds, but also partly because I worry about the robots coming for our jobs, and kind of a subsequent robot uprising a la iRobot. And partly because there's been a lot of discussion and excitement and worry about artificial intelligence in the business world and among our clients. So let's start with the basics. What is artificial intelligence, or AI, as it pertains to writing in business?
Right. So AI, and by the way, for anybody wanting to understand our dynamic, Elizabeth is on the doomsday end and I'm on the utopian end, right? So probably there is a nice middle point that our viewer or listener, for those who are on audio only, will take away. But when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it is in writing and business, just like any other area, AI is a computer intelligence that is performing tasks that normally would require a human to perform, right? So that's where we're separating AI from industrial machinery, for example. That's where we're separating AI from a calculator, right? Because there's sort of a critical thinking and decision-making element that is going on, right? That we think of as being representative of human intelligence. Now, that can show up in a very small, narrow scope, like the proofreader on Microsoft Word, right? Where it's trying to make guesses about the words that you're using, the way that you mean to use them based on context, right? So there's some decision making going on there, but it's so narrow that a lot of people don't think about that as AI. And then it can be as broad in scope as a large-scale language learning model like ChatGPT, where you can have a full-blown conversation. For myself, I love to use ChatGPT to build out marketing plans, and then I go in and can edit and have that template format, right? There's a lot of different ways that AI shows up in business, and it really depends on what is your unique context and need to determine what AI is right for you.
So you're saying I've been using AI for decades with spell check, that I've been using the robots and feeding the monster?
Dun, dun, dun.
That is what I'm saying. And I'm so sorry to anyone in our audience who is anti-AI and realizes that if you have played an online game of checkers against a computer, then you also have been using AI. It comes in so many different forms. I think what has been kind of this big boom in the past 5 years has been a result of developments that we've made in neural networks and machine learning. And so that's why the AI is now able to, quote unquote, train itself and expand its knowledge base that it's pulling from at such a quick pace compared to previous models, which again, very narrow in scope.
Now I have to ask, so spell check to me doesn't feel that scary, maybe because I've been unknowingly using it for decades and just thinking it's my friend. But what is the scary AI that people are now like, hey, this is going to take writing jobs, this is going to take a bunch of our jobs where we're going to have to essentially redo our economy, all this kind of doomsday stuff, which I'm not sure is quite unfounded, quite frankly.
And there are a lot of concerns about some of the behind the scenes in AI as far as discrimination as well. And I've done some research on that. So yeah, kind of there's a shady side to it. And I am usually on the side with Angie of this is great. This is going to make our lives better. But then I think there's a lot of things to think about. So I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to interject that aspect of things too.
No, that's a good aspect. And I think, Angie, we should break this down. First, what is the scary AI? And then maybe tell us about the shady side of AI so we understand the whole plane.
The whole picture.
Yes, the whole picture.
Scary and shady. So you both asking me, an AI utopian, to diss AI. No, I kid. But yeah, so to answer your question, what a lot of people are scared of, there's several elements really. So first of all, Elizabeth, to your point about jobs being taken, this is a big fear, right, that people have. And I want to compare what's going on right now with AI to back in the late 1800s, early 1900s with the Industrial Revolution. Very similar place. I mentioned machinery earlier and how that's so different from AI and artificial intelligence, but what we're seeing and how it impacts the workplace is very similar, and workplace sentiments, right? So what a lot of people are scared of is generative AI. And so generative AI is not only making those critical thinking, problem solving choices like we see with the proofreader, where it's making a suggestion based on existing content that you give it. But generative AI, right, is creating new content, right, based on prompts from the user. So to give an example, with ChatGPT, I might say, I'm an executive consultant with Hurley Wright, and I would like for you to produce an annotated bibliography on AI and writing curriculum for me to use as a basis for a research article that I'm going to publish on this topic, right? And ChatGPT is going to not only do the steps of researching and pulling that scholarly information for you, putting it into an APA citation or however you want it to format, but it's also going to generate content in that it is going to create its own unique summaries of these articles. It might add a little flavor text if you want it to, that has that text in a particular tone, right? It's not just copy and paste, and it's not necessarily a response that's been generated before, right? So not every response has been tested. And that kind of goes into Sarah's question, right? The ethics and the legality of generative AI is a big area of concern, especially when we're talking about open AI, cloud-based AI, which has been trained on often copyrighted materials, right? And so sometimes the AI will pull text from copyrighted materials and present it as though it's new, right? But all the AI is trying to do is respond to you in the way that you want it to, right? It's trying to please you. So if it thinks that when you tell it to write a blog article, that this paragraph from somebody else's blog article is the kind of thing that you want, we can run into issues there, right? Where if you just copy and paste a response that you get from a generative AI platform, especially an open source cloud-based platform like ChatGPT, you are potentially plagiarizing, right?
So ChatGPT thinks that plagiarism will make me happy?
It thinks that you won't know that it plagiarized. Think of ChatGPT like a high school student who is trying to get a good grade on a report, right, that they didn't study for. And so they're doing a lot of last minute actions. Now, what ChatGPT has on the high school student is that it can read the entirety of the internet and its knowledge base, and it can critically condense and summarize and regurgitate information so much faster than any human can do. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily that the end product is that much different than when I was in my freshman year English class and I would just sit there and reword every paragraph of the Wikipedia article, right? So that it would get by the plagiarism checker, but it's still just copy and paste with a little flair on it, right?
Do you want to put a disclaimer on that
I completely disavow all plagiarism. I tell this story all the time as an executive consultant when I'm leading my classes. I love working with clients who hate writing. Reason being that I hated writing for most of my life, right? I thought I was a bad writer. I didn't know how to phrase things in a way that was both engaging, but also technically correct and accurate and organized to where someone else could follow it and take the action that I wanted them to. And so I had one instructor that completely revolutionized my approach to writing, to where I started thinking about writing in terms of reader expectations. That has led me to where I am today, where my whole career is now centered around writing, and then marketing, which is just an offshoot of writing in its own way. And so for anyone who thinks that every writing instructor or consultant has just always had this talent, right? That's just not the case. And it's definitely a skill. I call it a muscle, like you go to the gym and you have to build your muscles slowly and with purposeful effort. It's the same way with writing. The more frequently you write, the more you challenge yourself to write better. And better means something different to everyone, but the more you challenge yourself, the better you get.
So, okay, Angie, you said a couple of things that I just got to ask about.
Here we go.
First of all, you said that generative AI gives me something unique, but it's pulling, from my understanding, the database of pretty much everything that's written on the internet. Anything that's on the internet is free game. So is anything truly original that the AI spits out. How do I know it's not? I think it just kind of does a combination of things and spits out a combo, and you hope that combo hasn't existed anywhere else. Is that incorrect or correct?
I love this question because I think it takes us back to that old adage, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, I was going to say, what about tapping into the collective unconscious and things like that? Isn't that the same thing? Not to get all esoteric on us. Sorry, Angie, go ahead.
No, but Sarah, exactly what you're pointing to, we as humans subconsciously do the same thing, right? We pull from influences that we've absorbed our whole lives. Now, the difference is, key difference is that ChatGPT hasn't lived a life outside of the documentation that it's absorbed and reviewed, the conversations that it's had, as well as the training that it's had, right? And so while we as individuals have unique life experience, right, that is just ours alone, right? ChatGPT is only able to pull from that kind of collective human experience and body of works. And so there's kind of a gray area there, right? There are sentences that ChatGPT will generate that have never been generated before, right? Do you call that a creative act, or do you call that a reorganizing of information? I'll let you decide, right? That's a philosophical area of discussion around AI that goes beyond a technical yes or no.
And we do want to also mention I think it was a federal court case just came out recently that ruled someone did a painting where it's mostly done by AI, and they tried to get a copyright for it. The Copyright Office said absolutely not. That the work itself has to be primarily human generated as opposed to AI generated. And I think this has legal ramifications for the future with writing as well, because if we are generating something with AI and it's not primarily human generated, can we copyright it? Can we use it? Are we violating copyright? And I understand that sometimes humans goof. I think, what was it, George Harrison accidentally plagiarized My Sweet Lord from a different song. I forget what it was.
Shirelles.
The Shirelles. Thank you,
He's so fine. Yes.
And
Shirelles
even
Fish-Chiffons.
one of them. And even Helen Keller accidentally plagiarized a book that she wrote, and she had to pull it. She didn't remember that she had heard, or not really heard, but that she had experienced the book before and she thought it was her own. But what happens when I'm an author, or I have material that's gotten out on the internet, say like intellectual property, that I didn't want anybody to use? It's mine, it's copyrighted. And just because ChatGPT went, ooh, look, it's on the internet, it's mine now, sucker. Who do I sue? What do I do? What's my recourse of action as a business owner, as an author?
So that legal argument would more so be between the individual whose copyrighted materials were used in the training of the AI and the developers of that AI itself, because I, Angie Pennington, do not decide which materials are accessible to ChatGPT, right? Now, ChatGPT, OpenAI themselves, they do have a statement that if you are using AI to generate content, which is then published, right? And especially if it's used for commercial purposes, you are supposed to have a disclaimer that OpenAI was used to create some or all of these materials, and that it has been reviewed, right, by the person who is presenting it and edited as necessary. And so there's kind of also a whose responsibility is it, I think is what you're getting at. The question, ultimately, whose responsibility is it to make sure that AI generated content that is published is ethically and legally sound? And I think that it's a shared responsibility. However, ultimately, if I publish something, my name is on it, I'm responsible for it, and I can get pulled in to a lawsuit, right? And so that said, I think that we have to be critical thinkers when we're using AI, just as any other resource, right? And that's what it is. It's a resource. It's not a replacement for the individual. just as machinery needs operators, AI needs thoughtful, critical prompters, editors, etc., trainers. You need someone in the driver's seat, right? We have AI that are training other AI right now because we're reaching a point where the open source knowledge base available to incorporate into the neural network is now being more and more limited, right? We are reaching points to where, okay, everything that's not copyrighted been incorporated. Okay, so either we incorporate more copyrighted material, or we have AI train itself, or we have people train the AI, which is way more expensive. So guess what happens? The AI trains itself. So very complex on the technical side, the back end of how this issue is being dealt with. However, on the front end, on the user end, for our business owners, for directors of a department that might be using AI, I want you to know, even if you, as a decision maker in your company or organization, don't want to use AI, your people are probably using it, right? So let me clarify that statement a little bit. There was a recent workforce survey that was done by Microsoft and LinkedIn. 3/4 of the professional workforce are using AI for workplace writing.
What kind of AI,
Wow.
Angie? Spell check or generative?
This is a generalized AI, so it's everything under the sun.
So it could be Grammarly or ChatGPT or even, whatever. I know even in our email accounts, it'll finish my sentences for me.
At the same time, only 1/3 of employers have intentionally implemented AI into
Wow.
their workflow, right? And have developed policies or standards related to the use of AI. So what we're seeing here is that even if you don't have a plan in place for how AI is going to be used in your workplace, people are using it. And in fact, people are afraid to admit that they're using it because they don't want to be told they're not allowed to. And so they're going behind their supervisors' backs. They're using ChatGPT to help them write their reports. They're doing these things that could get organizations in huge legal trouble because of all the reasons we discussed and more. Sarah mentioned earlier ethical concerns about biases, right? That can show up in AI. And that's because we as humans are biased, right? And then you're training this robot on human biases and skepticisms and influences, right? But yet people lean on AI like ChatGPT as a sort of wealth of truth and knowledge. And that's just not what it is. Like I said, I would compare it more to a person who knows a little bit about a lot, right? And has had no major life experience. And so you can't trust everything that you see on the internet, including what ChatGPT tells you. That said, as an employer, your people are still using it. So you need to figure out, how do we create standards around that? How do we work together as a team to figure out what's the right way to implement so that we're not getting in major legal trouble and we're not promoting biases, right, that are completely unfounded?
Well, let me ask you, why do these people start using AI in the workplace in the first place? Because it sounds like it's from a place of, hey, I don't want to do the writing work. I don't like writing reports. I'll just bring this in to make that easier. That seems like that's a workplace culture issue that maybe needs to be addressed at a deeper level than just we are or we aren't going to use AI. Tell me a little bit about that. What kind of workplace cultures do we have where people feel like they have to sneak around to get help to do things by machines.
Yeah. No, what a thoughtful way to word that question, because really what's going on right now in the workplace is that expectations are higher than ever, right? We are expected to perform at a level that has never been seen before, right? And those workplace expectations are only growing, right? And so you have people who genuinely just want to do a good job, right? And yet they're pressed for time, they're pressed for resources. And so, to your point, Sarah, it could be that they have not gone through any sort of significant writing training, for example, in their workplace. A lot of employers bring on degree professionals, whether they be associates, bachelors, masters, even PhDs at times, assuming that because you have a degree, you can write well. And let me tell you, that is not true. As somebody who did my graduate research on workplace writing, in particular, the area that we studied was how college does or does not prepare graduates for the writing that they actually do in the workplace. Employers remarked that, sure, the people who had their bachelor's or master's did tend to have better grammar and spelling. They were still just as clueless as somebody with no college education when it came to the actual workplace writing expectations, standards, genres. And so the most successful writing was taking place in workplaces that had a onboarding program for new employees, right? That caught them up on, hey, here's our specific expectations, because you can't assume just because somebody had 10 years of engineering experience, that doesn't mean that they know how to write for your specific engineering firm, because you might have specific regulators or clients or colleagues, right, who have different expectations than in their previous context. I've even seen this with healthcare administrators who move from one department to another within the same organization. There's going to be different expectations, right?
True.
So I think there is a sort of onus on leadership to acknowledge that if you haven't prepared, right, your team for the expectations of this workplace, they're going to be constantly playing catch up, right? And the areas that they're going to be playing catch up in are not the areas that are listed on their job description. Therefore, they're going to look for the quickest, cheapest way to optimize their workflow. And one of those ways is going to be something like ChatGPT, right? I don't like writing reports, but I have all the data. Let me just throw it in, not think about the fact that this is a cloud-based platform and that our client data is sensitive and confidential and is now going to be used to train this platform, right? I've just broken my NDA, right?
Yeah.
There are issues that can come up by trying to ignore this problem. And what we're seeing is that a lot of leadership is aware that this is an issue, but they're being slow to move. They're taking too much time to deliberate on what's the best course of action instead of partnering with experts, right, to help them implement standards that work for your organization that are going to keep you from getting sued, help optimize your workflow, et cetera. I mean, there are reasons why people are using ChatGPT and other AI, and it's really just because they're trying to do the best job possible as quickly as possible. And that's meeting the standard that's been set for them.
Are there any positives then to having AI in the business world other than faster, get things done?
Absolutely. I think that one of the biggest strengths of AI for the writing process is it can help you in that pre-writing phase, right? When you're trying to brainstorm, when you're trying to organize your thoughts, when you're trying to think through something. A lot of the writers that we work with at Hurley Wright they have trouble just getting started, right? And once they get started and they get in the flow with writing, it all goes easier from there because they know what they're talking about. They just don't want to write about it. And so what we talk about with pre-writing strategies is just anything to get you in the act of writing, right, is going to help you. And so I think that that is just one of the most important things that specifically large-scale language models can help us with, because you can have a conversation back and forth, right? I use ChatGPT all the time in that context. Another thing that AI can help us with, generative AI, particularly the custom GPTs that you're seeing a lot of businesses are implementing now, is that if you train your own custom GPT on just your business's documents, right, then you essentially have a research database that you can have a conversation with. And so I'm seeing this with clients where, for example, they are training a proposal writing database based on all their previous proposals. And that is allowing them to optimize their writing process. And so that's something that's very significant because it would take me personally dozens of hours to read through years of proposals. However, I can trust that this AI, if I know how it's been trained and what it's been trained on, right? If I know who's the driver at the wheel, and maybe not even the driver, maybe I would say the designer or the mechanic, right? Who has kind of done all the wiring behind the scenes, then I, as the driver, prompter, can trust more so what the result is that's coming out of it.
These customized GPTs or AIs, they are not reaching out to the internet. They're not pulling from that database of the wild, wild west where things can be awful, they could be good, whatever. They're only pulling from a database of approved documents by the organization. And in theory, nothing would get out of that AI onto the internet. Is that correct?
Correct. If that's how you have designed your custom GPT, correct.
So that sounds expensive, Angie.
It is expensive. You have to have somebody on staff who is an expert in this area. And I'm not talking about somebody like myself, a writing consultant who specializes in AI and writing curriculum. I'm talking about computer and software engineer, machine learning expert, right? You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment, which a lot of small businesses just don't have, right? And so many organizations, they just simply can't afford to design their own custom GPTs, and therefore
they're open to lawsuits.
They're open to lawsuits if they don't develop a standard, right, on how to use the free or low-cost alternatives which are available. I mean, you mentioned Grammarly earlier. We talked about ChatGPT a lot, but Grammarly is another form of AI that enhances the writing process in some cases, can completely disrupt it in others, and in many situations, people don't realize the free version of Grammarly claims the copyright to all of the materials that you use to produce. And so there are things as a user you have to be so critically aware of. But again, going back to that discussion of how are people actually using AI in the workplace, many people are using it on an island. They're not talking about it with their colleagues. They're not talking about it with their leadership because they've seen that they're getting their work done more quickly. They're getting commended for their productivity, and they don't want to feel like they're outed for cheating, right? And so there's kind of a shame that can come along with using AI that leads people to hide it, which again can open us up to these ethical legal issues.
So then I'm so glad that you brought up Grammarly, Angie, because in the teeniest, tiniest little bitty print, it says, you have your materials, those are yours, except that we can use anything that runs through us and we can use it through third parties and do whatever we want with it. And that's one of the main concerns, right? Is I don't want my information going to purposes that I don't agree with, that I don't know, that I don't have control over, where I might be responsible for something years down the line. They're like, well, it's your information that caused this big problem. Like, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. It was the robots. That's one of the huge concern. And when people just go, oh, I'll use Grammarly. Look at the itty bitty tiny whiny print. And Sarah, I'll throw it back to you because I know you had a question there. And then Angie, I want to break down some things that you said because you said some really important things and I want to break those down.
Well, my big question is, especially for those who are listening or watching, what are folks supposed to do? If a small business can't afford to bring in an expert to create an internal chat GPT or AI, and big businesses aren't necessarily at a place where they're like, hey, you know what? We're not going to talk about it. It's just going to be this thing that's in the background. So I guess my question is, what can leadership do in your opinion? Because obviously we're putting you on the spot, asking you to fix a huge problem that's been debated all over the world. But in your opinion, what do you think folks need to do?
Absolutely. I think that ultimately, I love the way that you phrased how to address head on, because that is the approach that's needed. A lot of people want to avert their eyesight. They want to pretend like it's not an issue in their workplace, but it is. And so what a leader needs to do, regardless of your organization, you need to have the talk with your team. What is going on right now with our use of AI? Who is using AI, right? How are you using it? What are the strategies currently being implemented? And what are the standards that we have or should have in place? Now, I will say, you don't need a machine learning expert, right? You don't need software engineers there. If you are not developing a custom GPT, right? Which again, it's a very select few who are, those who have not only the time and money to spend on it, right? But that they have incorporated it into their long-term strategic planning. And even those who are investing in custom GPTs still need an immediate solution because that takes time, right? So the immediate solution is to have a discussion, right? And in Hurley Wright, when we work with our clients, we as consultants lead a workshop-based session where we kind of get on the same page about what is AI, what are the challenges, not just in general, but in your specific context. And now let's talk about it and make a plan to move forward, right? So I think that is the most important thing that you can do as a leader in your organization to get the ball rolling is just start the conversation. Look at, do we have budget to pull in somebody more experienced in this area? If not, then even just in the grassroots level, you need to start having these conversations with your team. You need to start doing some form of professional development. And that could even just look like buying a book, right? And you're all,
communication in the workplace. Are you serious? What?
I know. And I am biased because I've been training people how to write for over a decade. And so I often am going to recommend training-based solutions. However, I'm also the first one, as Elizabeth pointed out, to use new technologies if there's a way to optimize, right? And so I think that you just have to train the driver at the wheel. We don't let people drive cars without getting their license first, right? Because we know the danger to society.
True, very true.
Have a driver behind the wheel who doesn't know how to operate. And that's kind of where we're at right now. You need to have some form of training.
So let's break down the solution, because you kind of said the solution earlier, and then we've talked about it now. And I will say in AI, if trash goes in, trash will come out. So you've got to make sure that your people are not putting trash into the AI in the workplace. That means that they have to have the critical thinking skills and problem solving skills in place to write in the first place.
Something very human, right? Critical thinking skills.
Something very, very human. We cannot release the hounds. We have to make sure that someone's at the helm with the AI. So we have to make sure that our folks can write in the first place, right? Because if the problems go in, they're just going to get exacerbated by the AI, because the AI doesn't know that it's a problem. Would you agree with that first step?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we need to accept, much to my chagrin, that AI is here to stay. It's going to be part of the workplace. We've got to deal with it and have the talk, as you said. I feel like I'm that teenager in high school, the talk. But and if you don't want to do it maybe so aggressively where it's like, who's using AI? Raise your hand right now. Out yourself. Maybe just accept people are doing it. Let's do a training. But I've looked, there's so few trainings out there on AI. There are kind of some box shops like, here's how our program is. But it sounds like to make it work for a business, you need something customized where you do procedures and SOPs that work for your specific business. Would you agree with that, or you think I'm off base?
No, absolutely. And that's why it's my preference to start when I'm working with one of our clients to develop AI standards and writing practices, to start with a communication audit. And that's where we come in and we look at what you're currently doing. And the benefit is that it's not as scary as what you're describing, Elizabeth, where your supervisor is like, are you using ChatGPT? It's one of us, an executive consultant. And all of the conversations are private. They're confidential between the consultant and the individual who is being interviewed. And so all the information is being compiled, right, to be used to develop reports, training, etc. However, nothing leaves the room between the consultant and the client. And so I think that's what makes all the difference. Some organizations, you see this in different contexts where you might have like an ombuds person whenever there's a dispute between two employees, right? There are many scenarios where you need a third party to come in because people don't feel comfortable, right? They don't want to mess up.
Yeah.
They don't want to say the wrong thing in front of their boss. They don't want to get fired, right? We all have real reasons for why we might conceal what we're doing to be productive. And so I think that is one of the most important things, if you can bring in a neutral third party to really assess what is happening before jumping in to design a curriculum, right? To say, this is where we should go. That is really ideal.
That also helps to set the expectations that then would guide the AI training, right? Because here's what we should actually expect from the AI, not the sun, the moon, and a new pair of shoes, but these are the actual things. And these are reasonable, doable, and can be done in the time that we have for these documents. I think that's a good idea, setting those goals. Sarah, did you want to say something?
I was just breathing.
Okay.
Very human, non-AI thing to do.
ChatGPT would never breathe, Sarah, first of all. So that's why we're going to bring it in for the next podcast.
Fair enough.
Over my dead body, we will, but okay. And I do want to, in all disclosure, we at Hurley Wright do have an AI course that helps to train folks, and Angie and I both designed it. So you have the person that's like, AI, don't like it, it's evil, but I have to deal with it. And then you have the person that's like, AI, it's awesome. And I think that finds a neat medium. Oh gosh, I feel like a 1920s person. It's neat. It's a beneficial medium where you get a little bit of everything. You get the whole picture and you get something customized to you.
Like any medium. Like any medium, really. It's about how you use it.
Okay,
Definitely.
fair enough. You saved it with that last part.
Well, we've been talking a lot about writing and communicating and things that are all very human things that we do. And I'm of the belief that yes, AI is something that we need to monitor. We need to invest in training and really think about, especially human biases that come through in things like ChatGPT, but that essentially those human skills of communication and writing and critical thinking are really going to come out on top at the end of the day. Now, this is coming from someone with a media background who studied the history of media, where when the radio came out, everyone said, oh no, this is the end of civilization as we know it. And then time marched on. And then when the television came out, oh no, this is the end of civilization as we know it. And then cable, and then the internet and things like that. However, I think a balanced approach to this is good, because this has the possibility of changing the world in ways like we've never seen before. Let me ask this, and this by way of transition. Angie, we always ask our guests 3 distinct questions. And these are not things AI could answer. And we hope that you will give us some more insights to what we've been talking about today based on these questions. What's one thing that you wish you'd been taught about writing or communicating or using AI to do those things that would have made your professional life easier, or let's say even simpler?
One of the things that I wish I had been taught much earlier is that it's okay to talk to people about your writing. I think that shame plays a huge part in many professionals' writing process, because they have been told they're bad writers, or they had that red pen on their essays in school. And so we see this a lot, especially with highly technical professions like engineers, scientists, accountants, right? Where they specifically went into an area where they wouldn't have to write because they've had such a bad experience with writing. Then they find out in the workplace that they write every day, almost all day.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to talk with somebody about your writing. In fact, it's going to make it better nearly every time, because you're activating different areas of your brain that inspire better critical thinking when you are talking about the writing.
And writing training can actually include using ChatGPT as a writing tool. So
Absolutely. Sometimes I want to call up one of my colleagues or send a quick email, but I know that they're in a meeting, and there are times when I'll have that conversation with ChatGPT, not because it necessarily has any knowledge or insight to give me on the conversation, but more so because I just need to get my brain working on a topic, right?
and that also can help eliminate some of that shame. I'm not saying you have shame in your writing or when you're talking to ChatGPT, but you said that shame in feeling like, hey, I don't know how to write, so I'm going to turn to this technology. I think it kind of goes back to, let's use a tool to get better, and let's take training to get better, so there isn't that feeling of shame. We like to talk about empowering employees to be more confident and more efficient writers.
Absolutely. And I think that, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown and, her research on shame and the power of vulnerability. I'm from Houston, Texas. So, got to represent University of Houston researchers. So, but to that point, talking and having these conversations about your writing with ChatGPT is a good first step if you're just completely terrified of speaking about your writing with anyone. However, I cannot stress enough the power of having a conversation with a live human being, right? And I would be very particular, if you feel that this is an area of sensitivity and vulnerability for you, be particular with who you choose to have the conversation with. As consultants, we're trained to listen and respond in non-judgmental ways, right? And I know that there are many listeners out there who know that that is not something that is available on their immediate team. So just be cognizant, right, that you can find someone to have these conversations with as you build your emotional and psychological resilience when it comes to writing, which I think we absolutely cannot separate
I
the
agree.
emotional and psychological experience of the writing process from the quality of the writing product. You have to be so resilient to rejection and complete, criticism of the product, right? You have to be able to separate the product from self. And that's very hard to do when those were your thoughts on the page, right?
Even for writing reports, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because writing is often the way that we experience our colleagues, our clients, our supervisors in the workplace, right? For some people, they're going to write a report that is read by somebody they've never met in person, right? So this writing becomes a representative of myself and my work capabilities. It's the deliverable that reaches the CEO. It's the deliverable that reaches the client who I wasn't in a meeting with them, but they need to know that I did the work that they requested of me. And so I have to tell them about it, right? So there are valid reasons for being scared of writing and for feeling, like I want to almost remove the self by just delegating to AI, right? Because then it's not me that messed it up, right? And you're kind of removing some of the accountability there. But just as we spoke about earlier, it's still on you, right? It's still a product that's going to have your name on it and reflect your capabilities in one way or another. And so to be able to accept that and move forward and still make strategic choices, I think is the most important thing.
That's brilliant. And I want to keep talking about this. And of course, I'm a huge Brene Brown fan myself. But let's move on to the second question, which is, what is a writing habit or rule or communication rule that we hear a lot about that doesn't necessarily serve us in our actual writing in the workplace? Now, this could be anything from grammar to writing a report doesn't matter, just put the facts in there, which we know is not the best attitude to approach a report with. What's something that doesn't seem to serve us well in our actual writing in the workplace?
Gosh, there's so many. I consider myself very anti-rule when it comes to writing because context is everything to me. And so there's no one hard and fast rule that works for every context. I think one of the things that comes up very frequently with my clients, they were trained for most of their academic lives on essay writing, literary essay writing at that, and scholarly writing, right? Which is a very particular genre and involves, starting off with an introduction where you're giving all of the context and you're kind of catching up the reader on like 300 years of this topic and discourse, right? And then they try to do that in the workplace in an email to their colleague when they're like trying to get something done. Right? And so I think that recognize the impulse to provide all of the context first is a leftover from academia. And often you want to start any communication with why you're communicating. What is the bottom line, right, of this communication? What is the reason that I'm reaching out for you, because that's going to influence how your reader reads the rest of the text, whether it be an email, a report, if it is a 20-page document, if it's a 2-page document, right? Your reader needs a purpose as they go through your text. When somebody pulls a scholarly article, they know why they're doing it. When somebody opens your email, they don't know what you're sending them, right? It's up to you to define that purpose for them. And so I think that that's one of the most important things, I think, is just understanding you don't have to give all of the context up front before getting to your main point. This is very particular to American standards for academic writing, is you start off with this lengthy introduction that eases the reader right into the topic and ends with the thesis statement at the end. So I guess what I'm saying is take that thesis statement and put it up at the top.
Angie, we have a running joke on this podcast that every bad habit that you have in your writing is because of college. And I think you just further confirmed that the joke is rooted in reality.
I would like to have a disclaimer because I am still finishing my degree. So I have an affiliation with colleges. So colleges, I'm a fan. Until my degree is finished.
Myself as well. So, I'm in the program for technical communication rhetoric at Texas Tech University. Go Raiders. And I love how my program is focused on the research of writing and what works and what doesn't work. And so there's a lot of breaking of tradition when you're in that area. And so there definitely are amazing faculty out there who are in the ground doing research, producing awesome stuff to be read and synthesized and regurgitated by people like me, Sarah and Elizabeth, to you in a way that is not going to make your brain explode. And so, I'm absolutely a big fan of researchers in any context. I love that. What I'm not a fan of is, how in higher ed, a lot of the time you have overworked, underpaid faculty who are assigned 3 more course sections than they thought they were going to be. And now they're rushed last minute to throw something together and create an assessment structure that they can handle, right, with limited resources, which doesn't always give the student the best education, right? So I think it's a more systemic issue with higher education and education as a whole, as opposed to individual professors and faculty who I have utmost respect for.
Preach, Angie.
My disclaimer.
I was just putting a disclaimer, at least until my degree was finished, but you said it much better.
After that, she's like, after that, goodbye. Well, Sarah, I have many more years ahead than you do, so my disclaimer had to reflect the scope of the years.
Well, and actually, the program that I went through, I have a background in media and news writing, and it's very, very different from a lot of other academic or any other academic writing. I remember I finished my master's thesis and I sent it to my committee, and they wrote back and they said, yeah, this is good, but you've got to rewrite it academically because you were very conversational. This would be great if you were recording this as a voiceover, but you've got to reword it so that it's not so conversational and user friendly. I thought, what have I gotten myself into after years of working in media? Speaking of, what's something you wish people had known or that you wish people knew about writing, specifically writing in the business world? And you may have already answered that. It's that maybe college writing, essay writing we do in English classes isn't the best way to approach things? Or what would your answer to that question be?
I think one thing that I wish more people knew about writing is that it can be measured. Success can be measured. Everyone thinks of writing as highly subjective, subject area, right? Where it's just my opinion or my personal preference, and, that there's no right or wrong approach, which to some degree I do agree with. There's not one right way to write. However, there's research that is done, readability studies that we pull from at Hurley Wright. There are usability studies, as you've mentioned, that many of my colleagues at Texas Tech run these usability studies to understand the science of writing, how people write, read, and interact with documents, so that we can better prepare our readers to take the action that we want them to take, right? And I always say, when you're writing, that's a social act, right? It's not done in a vacuum. You're not calling out to the void, right? When you're writing, unless you're journaling, I suppose, you want somebody to read it. And so don't you want to pull from the science on how your reader can understand and act on your documents most effectively? I think that that's so important. People misunderstand writing as being completely subjective when there is some real, both qualitative and quantitative research that comes out of writing studies. And it is so valuable to have that information because it informs your decision making.
And a lot of people think of the subjectivity because we think of creative writing, we think of poetry, where all of that is kind of subjective. But when it comes to workplace writing, that can be measured. That's scientific. And our communication audit is rooted in those scientific measures where we can actually look at things objectively. Now, Angie, we also have, since you did so well in the last segment, I got another one for you.
I can talk to y'all for hours.
Oh, we agree.
Yes. And this segment is called Doctor's Diagnosis, where listeners and clients submit their writing ailments and we write prescriptions for them to fix their writing ailments. So here's our listener's writing woe. It comes from a business owner. I'm trying to get my team to write better, but my managers are frustrated with our team members and I'm at a loss on what to do. I'm thinking about getting an AI program for my team to use, but I feel really conflicted. On the one hand, I feel like that would solve my team's clarity and grammar problems. On the other, I'm afraid that they'll become too reliant on the AI and will stop critically thinking about the writing that they do. What should I do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it starts with understanding what are the specific needs here. So clarity and grammar, while you might think that those are very specific needs, they're not. For example, grammar, some people say to mean punctuation, right? They're using a comma when it should be a period. They use a semicolon when it should have been a colon. In that case, I mean something as simple as a Microsoft Word proofreader can help you. Some people mean grammar to mean the tone that the writing is coming across in. And so somebody is using a more casual tone, which kind of violates some of the academic or workplace writing rules. And then the boss thinks, oh, this is a grammar issue. They don't know how to write in proper grammar. However, it's actually an expectations issue, as Sarah worded it earlier, a culture issue, right? Clarity, again, that's a big umbrella. You need to understand what is not clear, right? And so as a researcher, I'm always going to say you need to start with the research. You need to study what are the specific issues, right? And what are research proven strategies to help you bridge the gap, right? And that requires more effort, sure, than just installing a Grammarly for Business. It really does. However, it's going to help you understand what, if any, AI is really right for your team. And it's going to help you and your team develop a level of trust so that they can work autonomously and they can make decisions that might challenge the rules in a way that's effective and strategic and getting more done.
That makes sense.
We've been talking to Angie Pennington, our brilliant colleague and dear friend from Hurley Wright. And Angie, we are so thankful that you have been here with us during this time and sharing your wisdom with us. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about Hurley Wright and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Angie Pennington. You can reach out to me at Angie@hurleywright.com, especially if you're interested in any type of AI and writing consultation for your organization. That is the best place to reach me.
Well, Angie, I appreciate you being on the show today and having kind of a level head, if not a positive head, about AI today. I'm still not convinced we're not going to have a robot apocalypse someday, but it's good to know that it won't be anytime soon and that our jobs, as long as we adapt, will still be safe. It's one of those things where if you don't get ahead, you'll get drugged behind, at least when it comes to writing. So thank you so much for joining us today, Angie. This is the Hurley Wright's Writing Docs signing off. May your week be filled with good health and good writing.
Bye.
Hurley Wright can help your employees learn better strategies to be effective and efficient writers. Hurley Wright has helped numerous companies solve their writing issues, and we can help your team too. Contact us at 877-249-7483 or email us at info@hurleywright.com, and one of our writing experts will be in touch.